Please join me in welcoming the author of Take a Nap, Change Your Life, Dr. Sara Mednick.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. Thank you for that very warm introduction. And it's such a pleasure to be at the Beckman Center. I've never been here before, and it's such a beautiful place. And we were able to get here a little bit early, and my husband, who does electrophysiology at the Salk Institute, actually, was looking at the museum area and was saying, wow, Beckman made basically everything I work with in the lab, which is just an amazing, he made a huge contribution to science. So it's wonderful to be here. Okay, let's start. I'd just like to begin by dedicating this talk actually to our new United States President-elect, Barack Obama. Yeah. Exciting, good times. All right. Well, I'm going to first start off by taking us to a little island. I don't think they vote here. It's called Napland. And we're just going to arrive, first go to the visitor center and figure out why is there a place called Napland, and figure out why people should be napping, looking at all the different health reasons why napping actually might be helpful for your brain and your body and your heart. We'll also take apart some of the sleep stages and look to see what are the most important sleep stages for different kinds of memory processing. Then we're going to compare napping to what people usually do, which is drink caffeine, and see whether caffeine actually can measure up to napping. And you might be surprised to find out what you find. Then we're also going to go into the corporate world. I had the privilege of doing some interesting studies with the real world, so to speak, and see how napping can actually help the corporate environment. And then, of course, just give thanks to my lab, who are the people who are really doing all the work. So, why do we need research about napping? First of all, I'm sure you've all heard of the National Sleep Foundation, which reports on the state of sleep in America every year. And what they find is that 40% or more of Americans are actually sleep deprived, sleeping less than 7 hours a night when they should be getting between 7 and 8. And this is true for both men and women. Last year's study was on women, and what they found, just an extraordinarily high number, 67% of women reporting troubled sleep 3 or more nights a week, which I think is probably inflated in some way, but it's definitely a warning sign. This is true for all ages. There was a recent study looking at infants, and they found that infants that sleep less are more likely to be obese during infancy, right? So if we're starting off children at such a young age, actually depriving them of their sleep, and it's having some health consequences, you can imagine what just kind of the domino effect that causes. So what's the cost? Well, there's a lot of data now looking at the cost to our health. And what they've found is that sleep deprivation leads to an increased risk for heart disease, obesity, diabetes, stress, and depression. Of course, there's a lot of terrible news on people falling asleep at the wheel. Safety issues are, of course, really important to examine, but also some of the global disasters. These are birds that came from the Exxon Valdez oil spill, where one of the captain had actually drank so much that he passed out, and the guy that he left in command hadn't slept for 48 hours or so and didn't know what was going on and basically crashed into the land. And of course, the economic costs when people have all these fatigue-related errors. So the Department of Labor looked at that showed that actually we were entering in every day in our workplace at a 4% loss in productivity due to sleep deprivation. And of course, I work in a university, so I'm very interested in education. And what we find is that students in particular who need more sleep are falling asleep in their classes, and those students are not surprisingly actually doing worse in school. So can we actually start programs that make schools start a little bit later so that kids can actually sleep in the time that they really should be sleeping is a really good question. So what do we do instead of sleep? We do basically everything but sleep. It's usually the first thing that we give up when we start to get stressed And we, of course, then start to drink more and more caffeine because we're more tired. And what does that do? That creates a problem for falling back asleep at night. And it's a real vicious circle with caffeine. Sleep deprivation also leads to an increased risk for stimulant use, drug abuse, and smoking. And there's a whole region of research on sleep that shows that sleep deprivation can actually have people gain more weight and also reach for more high-fat and high-sugary foods. And this probably has something to do with insulin regulation, but there's a whole bunch of interesting hypotheses as to why this is, but it's very clear that obesity and overweightness is tied to sleep loss. And so here we have the problem, right, is that a lot of doctors, similar to everyone I work with, would say you just have to find more time to sleep. But it's very difficult to find more time. There was a recent study by the National Sleep Foundation of working Americans, and they found that people are waking up, at dawn, and they are feeding their families, going off to work, having a second job, coming home, taking care of their families, going to sleep, right? So there's not a lot of time to find an extra hour in the middle of the night. And so my question is, well, how can napping fit into people's schedules and actually benefit people? So not a lot of studies have actually looked at the prevalence of napping across people, but the National Sleep Foundation poll this year actually was looking at working people, and they found a surprisingly high number of people are actually reporting napping on a regular basis. That's 40% of Americans. And I think that people were pretty surprised to find out that, even most people who are at work are finding places to nap. I can tell you some of the funnier places later if you want to know. So, of course, reasons for napping varies. I study one kind of reason for napping, but, of course, there's many different reasons for napping. A lot of people say they don't nap at all, but, there's clearly some clinical reasons why people would nap if they have excessive daytime sleepiness or other clinical sleep disorders such as insomnia or sleep apnea. They'll fall asleep in the middle of the day. Also, just people say, I never nap unless I'm really sick. So that's another reason why someone might want to nap. Also, age is a really good predictor of napping. People nap when they're really young, and people nap when they get older. And that may be because there's a chronobiological shift that has you really wanting to go back to sleep in the middle of the day as you get older, or it's just that you have more free time and you can choose what you want to do, and so you're falling asleep in the day. And then there's also what I study, which is the reason for napping for well-being and productivity. So I'm actually going to be looking more at that this evening. There's a really interesting relationship that's been discovered between napping and heart disease. And this came out of the sort of noticing, or the scientists taking note that in siesta cultures, where they usually take a siesta on a regular basis, they have very low rates of coronary heart disease. And that could be because they all have the same kind of Mediterranean kinds of olive oily food, really healthy food, or they get a lot of exercise. But particularly people started wanting to know, is it because of the siesta? So in 2007, last year, there was a large study that came out in Greek adults. And this was a great study because they actually did they tested a huge number of people, 24,000 people. And this study is therefore large enough to actually look at a sample population of people who are the healthy adults who are sleeping in the day because they're healthy. So they have a large enough sample that they can actually control for possible confounding variables, comorbidity with other illnesses, like we already talked about, physical activity, whether people are actually very physically active or not, and diet. And what they found was quite amazing. So the first finding is that when people nap twice a week, and these are half-an-hour naps, they show a 12% decrease in coronary heart disease. So that was sort of nice. But then if you go on, people who nap 3 times a week actually show a 37% decrease in coronary heart disease. And it was hypothesized that these people are probably, first of all, less stressed, right? They have the kind of jobs that will allow them to take naps. These are working people. And also that there's some relationship between cortisol and coronary heart disease, and that it may be that the decreases in cortisol, stress hormone, in the daytime nap actually leads to a decrease in coronary heart disease. It's just to take note of that number, 37% is very similar to the kinds of percentage changes in people when they start to exercise 3 times a week or more in terms of their cancer risk and coronary heart disease. So this leads you to think that napping may actually be, quite valid in terms of preventative strategies for good health. So let's go on into the data that I study, actually. So we're going to look at napping and memory, and we're going to look at 3 different kinds of cognitive abilities. First is visual memory. And why I have this picture here is because visual memory is kind of hard to describe, but it's like basically somebody who's a bird watcher. If you've ever gone to a forest with somebody who's a bird watcher like my Uncle Ed, he's very good at picking out birds when I just see trees. And he can say, oh, that's that, and that's it, can you see that? And I can't see any of those things, but he's developed a visual expertise. Similarly to this woman who's looking at the baggage going through, and she's looking for knives and bombs and all those different kinds of things. And when you look at that, it looks like gobbledygook. How can they ever find anything? But she's learned how to visually see these different kinds of instruments and these different baggages. So that's the visual memory. Another one is motor memory, and that can be something like playing piano, anything with sequential motor movements, violin, typing, anything of that sort. And last one is verbal memory, which is just me telling you a story and can you just repeat it back to me. It's very simple kinds of memory, stuff that you need all the time, every day. So I'm going to begin by just going over what the experimental timeline is for these kinds of studies. Now this is time going across this period here. This is 9 a.m., noon, 1 p.m., this is military time, 3 p.m., 4, and 7. And what we do is we have 3 different groups come in. Everyone gets tested on a visual task, and the visual task is basically they're sitting in front of a computer, and very quickly are oriented lines flashing on the screen, and they have to say what kind of orientation the line is that they're seeing. And what we see is, do they get better at describing the orientation of the lines, or do they get worse? Looking at speed of processing, speed of visual processing. So we give them 4 different tasks, 4 different sessions. They come in at 9, then noon, then 4, and then 7. We have 3 groups. One group does not get a nap, so they just come in and they just do the cognitive testing 4 times in that day, and then they go home. The other group is a 30-minute nap group where they get hooked up to PSG, polysomnography, so we can look at their sleep, and they sleep for half an hour in between this 1 to 3 p.m. period, and the other group sleeps 60 minutes. So that's 3 different groups. So now we're going to look at the data. So here again we have 9 a.m., noon, 4, and 7. And this is actually every person's 9 a.m. performance is their baseline, and then we subtract every other subsequent performance from that to see if the change score. So this is all a change score. So what we have here is the sessions, and here we have performance. So if you go below your baseline performance, you're actually decreasing in your performance in this task. And what you can see, this is the no nap group. So these people are just being tested 4 times in one day. And what you can see is their performance is just decreasing. And this is a whole other area of research that I do, looking at exactly why people show this kind of decrease in performance. We were very surprised to actually find this, because you'd think that people would just stay at the same level. But no, they actually cannot seem to process the same information as well across the day. And I'm sure a lot of people would know what that feels like if you've ever stared at a computer very long. You just get tired of it and you want to step back. Well, we don't really let them step away from the computer. So here, now we put a nap in between the second and the third testing session, and this is the 30-minute nap. And what we find is that in the before they take their nap, they decrease in their performance, and then they actually stabilize after that 30-minute nap. So they don't continue to decrease, and that stabilization lasts for 2 different sessions. So they don't stabilize and then get worse, they stabilize throughout the rest of the evening. But what happens with the 60-minute nap? So again, the 60-minute nap gets worse in the second session, but then they have their 60-minute nap, and they get back to their baseline performance, and that baseline performance actually stays the same for the next 2 sessions. So 4 p.m. and 7 p.m., there's no difference between this performance and 0. So there's something really special here, because here we have a 30-minute nap and a 60-minute nap, and they're showing different kinds of performance. One is actually better than the other. Well, if you actually, I'm going to start to break down what happens when you're napping, but just to give you a little preview, The difference between these two naps is that one of them is only stage 2 sleep, and this longer one is stage 2 sleep and slow wave sleep. So I'm going to unpack that a little bit later, but just keep that in mind. So the summary is that working all day causes performance deterioration. Naps with slow wave sleep will eliminate this deterioration. That's the 60-minute nap. And we know that learning from a nocturnal sleep study, what usually happens is that you find that the learning on this task is related to both slow wave sleep and REM sleep. And so what we decided to do is we wanted to know whether we could actually stretch the nap a little bit longer and see if we could actually get more REM in the nap and show learning beyond the baseline performance. So now we actually eliminated the 2 middle testing sessions, and we just have one testing session at 9, one at 7, and we extended the nap period to be 90 minutes, and this is going to give us more REM sleep. And we have now the 60-minute nap with more slow wave sleep, and again, the no nap condition. And now I'm switching to a bar graph, actually, because it's easier to show you. So here what we have is, again, decreasing in performance is below 0. I'm going to show you the no nap condition, and I'm going to show you the naps that only have slow wave sleep and the naps that have slow wave sleep and REM. So first, here is the control group with no naps, and they show that same deterioration in performance. But now we're going to look at both the 60 and the 90-minute group. Here's the 60 and the 90-minute group, and only the naps that had slow wave sleep in them. And what you find is that actually the slow wave sleep, again, showed this reversal of this deterioration. So you stay at your baseline, you don't continue to get bad. But what happens now with the REM naps? What you find is actually significant levels of learning in both groups. And what's really interesting is it doesn't matter how long you slept. See, the 60 and the 90-minute groups are actually showing the same levels of learning. It's only the fact that you have REM sleep in this nap that actually matters. So that's that was the first thought that we thought. It wasn't actually total sleep time, which is something that I've always found really curious, because there's obviously differences in how long people should be napping and how long people should be sleeping at night. But if you're a very efficient napper, like these 60-minute nappers are very efficient. They go through all of their sleep stages in 60 minutes. And so there's actually the same level of learning in those two groups. So now let's compare the nappers at 7 p.m. to a group of subjects who actually have slept a full night in between test 1 and test 2. And then we can compare, is the nap actually producing the same levels of learning as a full night of nocturnal sleep? So this is subjects who have been tested on a full night of nocturnal sleep. And what you find is that the nap is actually showing equal amounts of learning. A nap this is the 90-minute nap, equal amounts of learning as a 7-hour night. So then we thought, okay, well, that's quite interesting, but maybe you've kind of satiated your amount of learning that you can have after this nap, and that if we bring these people back after having then another night of sleep, so they would have a nap and a night of sleep, how would they compare to people who have only had one night of sleep? Would they be more or show more learning or less? And here you see that people actually, all of this sleep appears to be additive. The more you get, the better you are. Because here you show double the amount of learning when you have a nap and a night of sleep. And then now you might be saying to yourself, okay, well, that's fine, but there's no way that a nap and a night of sleep can equal 2 full nights of sleep. I mean, I feel great after 2 full nights of sleep. So we had people testing after, day 1 and then again on day 3 after 2 full nights of sleep. And we find that there's the same exact amount of learning with a nap and a night of sleep. So that makes you stop and makes you wonder, what's going on with that nap? All right, so let's move on to, here I'm just going to do a little summary. So naps with slow wave sleep and REM produce learning on this perceptual task. Learning from the naps is equal to learning from a full night of sleep. So now let's look at the other memory domains. Motor learning. So what we're talking about is typing, playing musical instrument, anything of that sort. And this is actually work done by Matt Walker, who's now at Berkeley. And what he has is a finger tapping task, and it's basically a typing task. And he's having people typing in the morning and looking at their speed and accuracy, and then looking at them after a nap or after no nap, whether they actually increase their speed and accuracy in typing. So here we have in the white bars, this is just the training, pre-nap. This is the no-nap condition. So here we have training, and then in the afternoon they get retested, and you say no difference in performance between in the no-nap condition. But in the nap condition, when you actually have training, and then you have a nap in between these two bars, and then you get retested again, you actually show significant amounts of learning. So now what's interesting is you might think, okay, well, how did that, what's the relationship between slow wave sleep and REM? Well, he actually didn't find any relationship between slow wave sleep and REM. He found it in stage 2. So stage 2 sleep, he found a correlation with the amount of learning between the training and the test and the amount of stage 2 subjects had in their nap. So now you start to actually get to formulate these hypotheses about, or this actually a model for what's actually going on, is that you have these different sleep stages, and they're helping different kinds of memory processing. We have REM sleep helping your visual system, stage 2 sleep helping your motor system. So let's move on to another form of memory, verbal memory. So this is the names of people or places, phone numbers, or any kind of language learning, list learning. So now this was work done by Matt Tucker. And where basically he just had people learning a list of words. And then he had them learning the list of words in the morning and had them retested on that list of words in the afternoon. And this is a group that did not get a nap, and he's showing that here, this is the level of performance that they got to in the afternoon. Now, he had a specific kind of nap that had a lot of slow wave sleep. He didn't let them sleep beyond, probably had a 60-minute nap with not a lot of REM sleep, and basically all slow wave sleep. And he found that the slow wave sleep-rich nap helped people actually remember the words better. So this is the first kind of study of its kind actually to show that napping can actually help you just learn basic information of this kind. So let's kind of take all this in and try to figure out what we're saying here. So how is it that we can get all this memory improvement from such a short sleep period? It seems almost impossible. And in order to explain that, I'm actually going to go over a little sleep 101 with you and try to actually explain what I mean by all these different sleep stages. So let's look down here for a sec. We're going to start by just looking at what is called a 90-minute sleep cycle. So a sleep cycle basically means that you're going to go through all the different stages of sleep in one cycle, and it usually takes about 90 minutes for you to get through one cycle. You start with stage 1, which is this kind of very interesting nebulous period of sleep where people don't really know it looks very similar to REM, but it doesn't have rapid eye movements, and this is the period where you can actually feel like you're falling suddenly, like that kind of feeling. And you can start to have very strange thoughts, and it lasts for usually 2 minutes. But then you go into stage 2 sleep, and stage 2 sleep, as we know, is good for the motor learning, and it has very specific kind of electrical representation. Lots of things called sleep spindles and K complexes and interesting things like that. But it's pretty light sleep. Once you get into a lot of stage 2 sleep, the first half hour of your sleep cycle is going to be all stage 2. Then you start to get into deeper sleep, and that's what we call slow wave sleep. So that means that the second half hour of that 90-minute cycle is going to be all slow wave sleep, and that's a lot of delta waves, which are these big, high amplitude, low frequency waveforms, and your brain the blood is circulating very slowly. The brain temperature actually decreases, and when you wake up from a nap and you've been sleeping in slow wave sleep, that's that feeling of super grogginess, of sleep inertia, because your brain is in such a different state from waking that it makes you feel bad when you wake up. It's very difficult to wake up from slow wave sleep. So that's up till 60 minutes, and then you go back into stage 2, which is just this transitional stage for a sec, and then you go into, that REM sleep. I think that my little pointer's dying on me. Anyway, REM sleep. And REM sleep is that really exciting one that we always hear about, where you have all your dreams and you have the rapid eye movements and you're actually paralyzed during REM sleep. So it's a really fascinating period of sleep. Very, very fun to work with. Now, this is the way, I wonder, is there another pointer? Because now, I have this one. Let's see. just the other one wasn't working. Oh, this one works. Okay. So this 90-minute sleep cycle is the way it is in the textbook, but that's really not the way it is in real life. You actually, sorry to lead you up to that and then suddenly change it on you. But what actually happens is that, let's go over to this bar up here. So this is nighttime. And what we're looking at here is that these gray bars are denoting the different sleep cycles. And somebody who sleeps well should go through around 4 to 5 sleep cycles at night. And what you can see is the color coding of actually how the sleep stage is quantified across the night. And what you actually have is at the first part of the night, you've got a lot of slow wave sleep and very, very little REM sleep. See, that yellow is very little. But as you go through the night, you get less and less slow wave sleep through the cycles and more REM till the morning time. You actually have almost all REM sleep. And that's why you have a lot of what you think is you've been dreaming all night. It's really because you're waking up from REM, which is a really heavy dream state. So the reason I'm telling you this while we're actually having a talk about napping is because there's actually a shadow sleep cycle that occurs during the day. And I'll explain what I mean. So if you look in the daytime, this same relationship between a lot of REM sleep in the morning and a lot of slow wave sleep in the late afternoon still exists. So what you have is if you took a nap early in the morning, say 9 a.m., you'd have almost all REM sleep in your nap. But as you are awake throughout the day, you actually have an increase in your desire to go back to sleep. And it's called an increase in sleep pressure. And what that really is just an increase in your need for slow wave sleep. So that's why across the hours of the day, your slow wave sleep actually ramps up. And so if you take a nap in the morning, there's going to be a lot of REM sleep in the nap. If you take a late evening nap, you're going to have almost all slow wave sleep. But there's something very special about the naps that usually we take, right around 1 or 2 o'clock, we start to feel a little bit tired. And that's because those naps have equal amounts of slow wave sleep and REM, and they actually seem to be the perfect time for us to be falling asleep. And when we start to get into, I'm going to get into it now, the nap wheel, which is on the cover of the book, that is designed so that people can figure out what's the optimal time for them to get that nap that has that equal amount of slow wave sleep and REM. So let's look at the nap wheel. This is going to be, so the book is being sold after the talk, and I can walk you through it. No, I'll probably take you away from this so you don't get sick. But here, let's break this down. So the nap wheel is made up of 3 main stages of sleep. Stage 2, which I've already talked to you about, slow wave sleep and REM. So let's go over stage 2. What we know from stage 2 is that it's very good for alertness. Actually, that's the power nap that we all know about, is that first 20 minutes, half an hour of sleep is very good for alertness, but also motor performance. And now we put together slow wave sleep. Now, slow wave sleep actually, as we said, it actually ramps up as you go through your day. And the way that you can sort of figure that out is that the circle here is actually getting closer and closer to the edge. And the closer it is to the edge, the more slow wave sleep you're having. And what we know from slow wave sleep is that it's very restorative. That was the thing that actually allowed you to get rid of your deterioration in your performance. It's very good for clearing the mind because it's getting rid of all that useless information. It's very restorative, actually. A lot of people who do a lot of working out, it's when you have an increase in growth hormone, and that can be very good for muscle repair and tissue growth. And it's also very good for declarative and spatial memory. That was the word list that I told you about. Now let's look at REM sleep. So REM sleep, again, you have the circle getting closer and closer to the edge here, and the peak is right around 9 a.m. Now REM sleep, we know that it's very good for creativity. I have some really exciting new research showing that a nap with a lot of REM sleep can actually make people get more creative problem solving in their answers, or more creative in their problem solving answers. We've also looked at visual memory, showing that REM is very important for visual memory. And of course, dreams. Nobody really knows why we dream. And if anyone here does, I'd love to know. We do it all the time, but it's one of the most unstudied and almost unstudyable at this point in time. Nobody can figure out how to study it. It's a very fascinating thing, but it's clearly important. It occurs during REM sleep. Now, what's interesting about REM is that it's actually on a circadian cycle. Slow wave sleep is very much determined by the time you wake up. It starts to increase the amount of slow wave sleep that you have. But REM sleep is really steady. You have a lot of REM sleep in the morning and you have very little at night, and it's just the way it is. So now we can actually put the nap wheel together. So the nap wheel is based on the idea that your slow wave, the amount of slow wave sleep that you have in your nap is based on the time that you wake up in the morning. So what you can see is there's a wake-up time, and what you do is you want to set that to a specific time, say it could be like 5 a.m., and then you go down the circle, and you go to the point here where the slow wave sleep circle and the REM sleep circle actually cross. And that is the perfect nap time for you. Because it has equal amounts of REM and slow wave sleep. And it's likely that that's the time that you're going to feel sleepy. It's just a circadian drive to actually feel sleepy at that time. So I'll show you, each of you, when we get out there, actually have the wheel. So why is it that this nap hypothesis is true? So we know that or it's not true, but why do I have this nap hypothesis? So we know that slow wave sleep and REM in stage 2 enhance separate memory functions. So what you want is a nap that has all these different sleep stages. We know that naps during between 1 and 3 p.m. have equal amounts of slow wave sleep and REM, whereas morning naps have more REM and evening naps have more slow wave sleep. So we think that the perfect nap is actually able to consolidate the benefits of a full nap into a single sleep cycle. Whereas when you are sleeping the full night, you actually need all the slow wave sleep in the first part of the night, and you need all the REM from the last part of the night. Whereas in that perfect nap, you're actually able to get a single cycle with all of its benefits. So that actually opens up the idea of how we can use napping can we optimize napping schedules to enhance selective performance outcomes for driving, creative thinking, typing, but also different kinds of mental illness and age-dependent cognitive decline. There's many different ways in which I think napping actually has potential to do a lot of clinical help as well. So the truth is that not a lot of people are napping. As we know, it's less than 40% probably. So what are we really doing? We're drinking a lot of caffeine. So caffeine is used by approximately 90% of North Americans on a daily basis, and the age range of caffeine is just decreasing. More and more children's drinks have caffeine in it, and it's highly addictive. You can find it in water now, actually. But what's interesting is I realized that the cognitive benefits in terms of the scientific research was very mixed, and not a lot of research was out there. And so what I wanted to do is ask how naps and caffeine compare on these different memory tests that I've already shown you, the verbal, the visual, and the motor. And this was actually funded by the Department of Defense, DARPA, because they give a lot of uppers to their soldiers, and they don't really have a real strong sense of what that might be doing to the cognitive abilities of the soldiers. And so we wanted to do this study. But this is not in soldiers. So here we have same breakdown. We have a verbal list that they learn in the morning. Then they do the visual task, and they do the motor task. Then one group, we have 3 groups. One group, I seem to be sapping all the energy out of my little pointers here. One group has a nap here. And there's 2 other groups. They either take a sugar pill, a placebo sugar pill, or they take a pill that looks like the placebo, but it has 200 milligrams of caffeine. It's actually just a regular cup of coffee these days. Actually, Starbucks, interestingly, Starbucks has actually started ramping up the amount of caffeine that they put in cups of coffee. And so what used to be a 100 milligram cup of coffee, their regular tall coffee has, I think, 350 milligrams of caffeine in it now. So we're actually underestimating a cup of coffee. But that is part of what makes it addictive, right? Because you need more to get the same high. So then we retest people on that same verbal list, and then we retest them on the visual task and the motor task, and then we also now teach them a new verbal list. So we're looking at long-term verbal memory and just the ability to acquire new memories and how napping and caffeine compare on that. So let's go over the verbal memory. Here, this is the afternoon performance. What we find is that here we have the nap, placebo, and caffeine. What we find is that the nap is performing better than both the placebo and the caffeine. And what's really interesting here is I want you to continue to notice how the placebo group is doing. So now the placebo group are people who think that it's very highly likely that they're going to get a stimulant, but they don't get one, right? So here you can see that the placebo group is actually performing better than the caffeine group. Okay, and so what you might want to refer to this as is something that the to-do list that you wrote this morning. That would be the kind of the long-term memory task that we have here. Now let's look at the short-term memory task. And what we find is the same basic result, right? Napping is better than placebo, but now caffeine. Oh yeah, napping is also better than placebo, and napping is better than caffeine. And really look at how bad caffeine is actually here, right? So it's not just that it's just long-term memory is bad, but your ability to acquire new information, which is sort of, as I say, the intro of this talk. Could you actually remember what I was just saying? And if you had caffeine, you would actually be much at a disadvantage. But here you can see the placebo group is actually, significantly worse than the nappers, but also better than the caffeine group. So there's something interesting going on with that placebo group, and we think that we actually have a real placebo effect, which is that if you think you're getting a stimulant, but you don't, you actually perform better. And now in the motor memory task, again, here we have the placebo and the napping group actually showing same level of performance. And this is really astonishing because in this task, usually I've compared it to other waking groups without any kind of placebo, and usually they should be somewhere down here. But they're actually showing this really strong placebo effect, which is very cool. So you can actually, it's almost like having a nap. But now look what happens to the caffeine group, right? So this is like, madly typing away and making 10 times more errors than you need to, right? So what you can find is that even though you would think that people would be faster because they have caffeine in them, they're actually worse. They're making more errors. Okay? And now let's look at visual memory. So again, what I was showing you before was that same visual task. Usually when people are retested, they actually show a decrease in performance. And again, the placebo group is showing no change in performance, so they don't decrease. And we think that that's, again, a placebo effect. The napping group is showing the regular increases. And the caffeine group is somewhere in between the placebo and the nap. Not really that great, but actually, not necessarily that bad. But they're not significantly different from zero. So just to summarize here, what we found is that caffeine is worse than napping on 3 different memory tests. And, of course, this is going to be bad news for Starbucks, but I'm sure it won't really bother them very much. They'll just continue. And what we think that this is that we have that there's more of a perceived benefit from caffeine, that we actually think that caffeine is going to make us do better, but that perceived benefit may be due to the elimination of withdrawal symptoms and not actual cognitive enhancement. So when you need something, a pharmacological agent, because you're addicted to it, you just feel better after you have it. But it's not necessarily just making you smarter on its own. So then the question, of course, is which would you rather be, wired or smart? I just had this feeling that Starbucks should create this kind of Russian roulette thing that you just let them decide whether they're going to give you decaf or not. And you just can't know, and then maybe, you'll always be doing better when you get the decaf. So the last study I just want to tell you about is when we actually moved the nap into the corporate environment, and I was working with, the goal was to implement and assess napping as a tool for productivity in the corporate environment. It was a pilot program that actually worked out really well. We used a Manhattan publishing house that offered up their employees and the floor for the employees to sleep on. We had 40 volunteers, and the study took 2 months. First, everybody was asked to nap on 1 month and not nap on another month. And this is a within-subject design, so we can compare one person when they're napping on their napping month to themselves when they're not napping. That we asked them to maintain the same bedtime and wake time to make sure that it wasn't that their total sleep time at night was actually decreasing or increasing. And then we actually had them filling out questionnaires right when they woke up in the morning about how they slept at night. And then at the end of the day, they would fill out a 5-minute questionnaire just saying how they felt they did at work that day. Yep, daily assessments. Okay. So now I'm going to walk through. I'll just show you how to read these graphs. So we're first going to look at nighttime sleep, because everyone's first worry about napping is that it's going to interfere with your nocturnal sleep and rob you of your desire to sleep at night. And what's really astonishing, and I was really surprised to find this, but and it actually now that I've found this, I'm looking for it and I'm finding it more and more. So we're looking at people's perceived time to fall asleep at night on the month that they're napping compared to the month that they're not napping, and also whether they slept through the night on the month that they're napping compared to the month that they're not napping. This is the weekdays, Monday through Friday, and this is the average, Monday through Friday and the average. The red bar is the month that they're napping, and the white bar is the month that they're not napping. And just to give you a quick summary here, the month that they're napping, actually subjects had a decreased time to fall asleep at night by 14%. So they were actually better able to fall asleep at night. They didn't lie in bed too long. And they were more likely to sleep through the night by 12%. And this is true across most days, not necessarily that day, but most days it's actually really a beautiful effect of, there's usually, I'll show you later, but there's this great hump day effect where suddenly Wednesday everybody's a complete mess. But interestingly, the nap actually allowed people to have better sleep at night. And so what was their total sleep time? On the month that they're napping, they actually have increased amount of sleep at night compared to the month that they're not napping. And when they wake up in the morning, how refreshed are they? They're actually significantly more refreshed. So napping actually increased their nocturnal sleep by 20 minutes, which doesn't sound like a lot, but it actually really is, because those 20 minutes can be really helpful. It also increased refreshed feeling upon waking by 5%. So this is, of course, the one that I actually care most about, because the thing is, this is how drowsy they are at work and how many errors they're making on the month that they're napping compared to the month that they're not napping. And why this is important is because it's not when you're alert that we think that you're going to be making fatigue-related errors. It's when you're tired, right? And so you really want to say, so on the month that you're napping, are your errors actually decreased? And what you find is, there's a decrease in daytime sleepiness, not very surprising, on the month that they're napping by 10%. But there's a whopping 38% less likely that people are going to, that sleepiness is going to interfere with people's daytime activities. And that's actually, a lovely amount to actually give to an employer and say, listen, I'm making 40% more errors than I need to when I'm not napping. So go off and tell your boss that. I'll show them this data. And, of course, their mood and relationships also increased on the month that they're napping. They have an elevated mood across all weekdays by 11%. The quality of the interactions with coworkers actually also increased on the month that they're napping. Their alertness and stamina also increased by 11%. It seems to be that's what we found is the range is usually around a 10% change, 10 to 11% change on most measures. Mental abilities, just their ability to do good work, basically, 9%. Physical health, how many absentees did they have on the month that they're napping compared to the month that they're not napping? They had less absentees when they're napping. Okay, so then let's summarize here. The big question, right, is does napping interfere with their nighttime sleep? No, on the contrary. People kept the same bedtime and wake time, but had more restorative sleep on the month that they were napping regularly. So are people more alert when they nap at work? Yes, napping decreased interference from sleep on daytime activities by almost 40%. And how is performance improved with napping? On average, napping made a 10% improvement in this highly stressed Manhattan workforce. So, and this is a publishing house, and you can imagine what it would do for people in a factory, people who drive trucks, any of these kind of jobs that require that actually, you take yours and other people's life in their hand when they're sleepy. So, just my closing remarks are that I think it's very possible that you can do something like a nap initiative at work, and you feel free to talk to me about those kind of ideas. Also, napping is a trainable skill. For anybody out there who believes that they're not a napper, I used to not be a napper, and my research was the thing that actually got me napping, and I nap almost every day, so it's very definitely a trainable skill, and I have a lot of tips for how one does that. And also, to thine own sleep schedule be true. This is actually really about your nocturnal sleep, too. If you're somebody who needs to go to sleep later at night, and you have to then, of course, wake up early, then I would really stick with the schedule that works for you, and just make sure that you always wake up and know that you're going to be able to have a nap that day. And so if you get worried that you're not sleeping enough, all sleep is good sleep, and you want to always try to supplement your sleep with naps. And here is my beautiful lab. This is my grad student, and she's going to become a grad student, and she's now my grad student, my nurse, and my other grad student, and they're all fabulous. And these are the people I've worked with, my husband, and these are the funding agencies. And thank you. Visit my website there. I'm taking questions, too, if anyone has any questions. Yeah?
I feel when I get up from a nap, my mood is not very good.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder why that is.
That's that. Mm-hmm.
My question is that I don't dream when I nap, but at bedtime, sleep, I do dream. Is that
Yeah.
possible?
Yeah. So the first part is what we were talking about slow wave sleep. Is that me? Sorry. Is that if you actually wake up from slow wave sleep, you're going to feel that sleep inertia, and a lot of people have that experience. So what I recommend is that you sleep much less amount of time. So you only really want to get that light sleep, like a 10-minute, 15-minute nap is really all that's important, is all that you need, and you'll feel really alert from that. And if you get into longer sleep, you're going to go into heavier sleep, and it's going to cause more sleep inertia. Now, the dreaming it's not usually normal that people actually sleep that long so that they would get into REM sleep, and so it's typical that you wouldn't have dreams during your nap because you're probably sleeping up to 60 minutes, right? Are you taking, how long are your naps? Yeah, so you're not getting into REM sleep, and so that's why you don't get the dreams. But if you'd like, you could actually, if you want dreams in your nap, I can tell you how to do it. You just take a nap earlier in the morning. I have people napping in my study right now at 8:30 in the morning. I get them up at 5. It's terrible, painful study. And those naps are just all REM sleep. Yeah. Yeah. The tips for learning how to nap. Good. So very important is that in the same way that you can actually train your body to sleep at night, right? You have all these cues that you turn the lights down low and you change your clothes and you brush your teeth. Your body is really a creature of habit. And so you need to create habits for yourself around napping, and particularly really make time for it. So, and lie down and set a schedule where, okay, I'm going to take 15 minutes and just go into the bedroom and lie down, or if there's a couch, lie down there. Darkness. So always keep that schedule, basically, because then and maybe even do something that's a little bit of a ritual, like if you're somebody who wears a tie, take the tie off or take your shoes off. Usually lying down can be very conducive to falling asleep as well. And then light inhibits sleep, so it inhibits melatonin, and so if you are very sensitive to light, you can use eye shades, sound, obviously, earplugs, anything that is going to actually give you a sense that this is an important thing that you're doing. A lot of the time, the reason why we're not napping is because we feel like that we're being lazy or that it's not good for us. But if you just say, no, this is as important as getting exercise. I'm going to make this part of my schedule. And then you have to keep the ritual up for a while. If you literally are not falling asleep, keep it up for at least a week, and you'll find yourself really drifting off. And the other thing is really decrease your caffeine amount, because we don't even realize where caffeine is these days, but it's everywhere, and diet drinks and chewing gum. And so you want to, I don't drink caffeine after 10 a.m. so that I can fall asleep at like 2 or 3, basically. So, yeah. We're just beginning to look at comparing napping to quiet rest. In terms of some of the things I can tell you is that the deterioration, the visual deterioration I was showing you, that we have a quiet rest control group, and that shows the same levels of deterioration. So there's some things in sleep that are different than waking and deeply restorative. So and that's usually in slow wave sleep. That's not going to happen in waking, maybe unless you took some sort of a magic pill or something like that. But just in normal life, no. There's some aspects of sleep that don't seem to translate to waking. But rest itself can be very helpful. And a lot of the time when you think that you're not sleeping and you're just closing your eyes and resting, you actually do go into stage 1 and stage 2 sleep, which is getting some of those benefits. So I would always just say keep doing what you're doing if it feels good, because you probably might be drifting in and out of sleep, which is enough for you. Yeah? Oh, sorry. I don't know. Yeah, that's a big question in science. Why are there some people who just have so much trouble sleeping and some people never do? And there's quite possibly some genetic variation there, in which there's families of people who are insomnia, seem to appear to have insomnia, versus other people who seem to sleep really well. I know families of people who nap. So there may be some predisposition in that way, but it may also be that some people have trained themselves to lay awake and have anxiety and let the tape run, and other people haven't had that kind of training. So, and you can untrain those things as well. But it's a very good question. Yeah. Yeah, there's a study that nobody can believe, but there's a study of a 6-minute nap that shows really beautiful memory and alertness benefits. So there's something special about these naps that if you had 6 minutes of nocturnal sleep and then we said, okay, you're up for the rest of the night, it wouldn't please you. But for some reason, a 6-minute nap can be very restorative. So keep doing it. Yeah, it's very interesting. Yeah. Time you go to bed is actually not as correlated. Wake-up time is really is the strongest correlation. I have some other data that is not. I could bring it up, but I could just tell you what it is. So we looked at total sleep time, bedtime, and wake-up time in a bunch of different ways, and found that the strongest predictor was wake-up time for the amount of slow-wave sleep in your nap across the day. So it really is, when you wake up, you begin this process of building your slow wave sleep pressure, and that is very much to do with just the start of the day, just the start of your own day, as opposed to, and there's definitely some influence of total sleep time, but bedtime for some reason, and they're all somehow involved, obviously, because wake time and total sleep time and bedtime are related, but wake time seems to be the deciding factor. Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so a lot of this kind of research that came before mine is the reasons why their pilots are not allowed to fly by themselves in these long flights. They're given this is something that I think FCC, right? Is that FCC? FAA, thank you. The FAA, FCC's radio or something. The FAA doesn't like to actually let the public know, because the public is more freaked out about the idea that the pilot is napping than the idea that the pilot hasn't slept for 48 hours. So it's not something that's public knowledge, but if you talk to pilots, yes, they switch off in terms of who's napping. But they even now think that they even now have 3 pilots, usually on these really long haul flights, because, so one is napping and one is alert, but what if the other guy falls asleep and then you've got 2 pilots asleep? So usually it's definitely a scary issue, and reasons why I would love to work with, an airline that would like to do a little napping study and look at what kind of benefits we could show. Yeah.
Is it natural for other mammals to stay awake for 16 hours straight? And is it natural for humans to do that? That's something that's imposed on culture.
Yeah, there isn't any other animal that does that. So most other animals are polyphasic sleepers, and so they sleep in multiple phases in the 24-hour cycle. Definitely the way that our culture has moved away from even biphasic sleep, where we take a nap in the middle of the day, that is sort of, America in particular. I mean, the rest of the world is still really doing it. And don't, the country in Europe that naps the most is Germany. And then Denmark, actually. So the countries that you wouldn't, and Japan is actually, it's a mark of honor when you take a nap, because it means that you're working so hard that you have to nap. So so across cultures, there's a very different relationship to napping than in America, which is somehow, my philosophy is somehow that when we left the old world, we had to give up all the traditions because they're all lame, but then we actually gave up a lot of the good ones as well. So hopefully we're going to work things back in there. Yeah? Yeah, that's the same period of time. That's usually when you're kind of driven to go to sleep. Yeah, exactly. Yeah? No, it was just a pill, sugar pill. So there's just sugar in it. Yeah. Yeah, I compare it to coffee because it's the same level of. They were taking a pill. Yeah. Sorry. Yeah. It increases your ability to go into REM because you're sleep deprived, and a lot of people with sleep apnea actually do go into REM, and they have most of their apneic events in REM because you have this relaxation of the muscle tissue, and you actually have this atonia. And so what happens is you have this. That's when you see the sleep apnea, and when you actually do most of the diagnosis of sleep apnea is during REM cycles. Yeah. Great question. I'm just beginning. I've been pushing to do meditation and napping studies with the military for so long, and it's just now, I think, beginning to happen, where there's some evidence that meditation seems to be providing some of the same benefits as sleep in people who are very experienced meditators, that they don't seem to sleep as much, and so they're probably getting they may be getting some of the same benefits, and so. But what those have not really been studied. They haven't been compared directly to the benefits from sleep. And so I'm excited. I'm actually beginning to do that kind of research now, and I'm actually really hoping that I can, because one of the most sleep-deprived cultures is the military culture, and so to find interventions that are not drug-related, that you can actually increase the well-being of the soldiers is actually really vital. So my hope is that I'll be able to do this study where I do a napping or meditation protocol with them and look to see whether it actually does increases in decision-making and all that kinds of things. Yeah?
If you wake up in the middle of the night, is it best to just get up, or is it best to try?
It depends on how long. So if you wake up and you have to go to the bathroom, or you just wake up and you're kind of tossing and turning, but you find that, oh, no, I could probably go to sleep. Just stay there and, find yourself going back to sleep. But if it's the kind of wake up that you are alert and you're awake and you're completely, this is a really, really common thing. And I think that too often is this perceived as being something that should be treated with drugs and is something bad. And, it's very likely that this is just, there's some evidence that this is the way we used to sleep, actually, that there was a beautiful book by a historian called Richard Eckrich, I think is the name. And he showed that people actually used to sleep in two different phases at night. They call it first sleep, then they'd wake up and they'd go clean the house and go talk to the neighbor, and then they'd go back to sleep and they would call that second sleep, and then they would take naps. And so that may, this waking up and being alert and going and being able to do something productive, I think is not ill. I think that there's some things that could be good about that. And so I always, suggest that you just give it a try, see what happens if you go and do something, and then when you get tired, go back to sleep, and then give yourself the nap so that you're actually going to get all the sleep that you need. Yeah? We have a poster coming up at the sleep conference where we're examining habitual nappers compared to non-habitual nappers, and I don't know what the data looks like yet, but I will get back to you. Yeah? No. We just have a quiet room and they just go to sleep. So I haven't looked at any kind of aids of that kind, but I think it's interesting because people anecdotally will always say, oh, I use this and this really helps me, or I have this trick for creative thinking when I'm napping and, dropping the spoon so it hits the floor so you wake up and you write down what you're thinking. So there's all these different tricks that people use, and I haven't even begun to explore any of them, so no. Good. That could also be it could be just, a lot of these effects could just be a conditioning response. It's not necessarily the thing itself, but you've conditioned your brain to be able to produce good work in that state. So I have some data, not in my lab, but I know of some data where if you study drunk, you should take the test drunk because it's the same kind of state-dependent effect. So I'm always a little wary of these kind of details. Yeah? Yeah. Regularly traveling is tough because then you feel like, should I stay on my single time zone or should I always be trying to adjust? In terms of those kind of studies, the worst thing you can do is not go back to what your natural one is. Because having a rotating shift work basically is the most unhealthy thing. The most unhealthy people are people who have rotating shift schedules where sometimes they're working at night, sometimes they're working in the day, sometimes they're working at night. Having a set schedule is the most helpful. So the second you get into a time zone, try to acclimate immediately to that time zone and to not try to stick with the old one and hope that you're going to stick with that in long enough, because you won't stick with your old one. You'll acclimate by all the lights and everything, but you'll be trying not to. So my best suggestion is always to acclimate to the new time zone immediately and start, if you're a napper, nap at the exact time within the new time zone that you would normally be napping, and keep all these things really consistent. Yeah? Yeah, I think that a lot of this comes down to finances, right? Well, you have to just give me the business meetings and I'll go. Honestly, I would be happy to talk to people, and it's very much about, whether you can save money. And I am a strong believer that napping in the middle of the day would be saving people money, because they would decrease their errors, they would decrease their insurance, health insurance would have, I think it would just be, and probably attrition, would decrease as well, because what happens is that you actually also give people, with this economic crisis that we're in, you can't be giving people any more perks, but this is a kind of perk that's free. And it actually shows a lot of respect for your workers as well, right? That you would actually say, no, I trust you. Take care of yourself. In the same way that people now can work from home, whereas in the 80s that was completely crazy, right? So there are some social shifts that I think can occur, but you need to show the financial benefit of it. Yep. Yeah, there's Bill Clinton. Churchill was a big napper. He wrote tons of books about napping. Edison was a napper. Napoleon. Let's see, who else? Who? Ronald Reagan. Yeah. I think he napped all the way through. Yeah, there's a whole bunch. Yeah. You know who's a big napper? I happened to meet Lance Armstrong, the cyclist, and he naps every day for 90 minutes. That's his, no matter what, that's his secret of success, he says. Yeah.
Should we be concerned with the people who I perceive as one of the biggest violators of what you say and should know better? And I'm talking about emergency rooms and medical staff that work 24 hours.
Oh my God. Yeah, they're the worst. So I can tell you horrible stories. You want to hear them? So there's a really very amazing doctor who not only does he do sleep research, basic sleep research, but he's also doing a lot of stuff working with legislature to try to. He was the reason why actually doctor interns had their hours decreased to 30-hour shifts as opposed to what it used to be, which is probably, I think, 3 days that they were allowed to be up. So what he actually found was that he did this enormous study where he had anonymous phone calls, basically. He had the doctors call and say how long was their shift and how many errors they made. And he compared the people in the 30-hour shift to doctors in a 10-hour shift and found that the 30-hour shift people were making 700% more errors. Yeah. So I'll give you the reference. It's a totally frightening series of studies, and this is errors that range from pricking themselves with the needle, making really important errors. So there's definitely, and there's a whole study on nurses after these long shifts, not even about the mistakes that they're making at work, but that they have a much higher rate of car accidents on the drive home. So they're Well, I think there's a big, thing about self-perception in that group where they actually are bred that the sort of the sleep is bred out of them, so to speak, or that they're somehow more special than others, and that's a really strong kind of macho quality of the medical school world, where the stories that you hear is that you're just not allowed to be weak, needing sleep or anything, and then it's amazing. They will look you in the eye and say, "I don't need to sleep. I don't need sleep. I just don't." But then you can show them the data and say, "Well, that's not me." So it's a big kind of stumbling block there, mental block. Yeah. Oh, sorry. Oh, that was in parallel. Which one? Is what relevant? Oh, yeah. There's a lot of studies looking at adolescent sleep and showing actually that children are sleeping about an hour less than they should. And a lot of what happens in adolescence is that you have this natural shift in your circadian rhythm so that you will be naturally needing to go to sleep later and wake up later. And that's usually in the teenager years. And unfortunately, a lot of schools starting earlier and earlier as kids get older. And so those kids who are the strongest biological shifters are the ones that are doing the worst in school because they're not getting enough sleep. So it has a direct application to every different, age group and work group and all those different things. It depends on the age group. There's a whole it can depend on, if you're an infant and a toddler. Look online on the National Sleep Foundation. They have huge amounts of information about what optimal levels of sleep are for those age groups. Yeah. Well, I'll say that what usually happens as you get older is that what happens. Everyone has this idea that you're supposed to sleep less, and you do, but you don't sleep that much less. What just happens is that you wake up more, and so you probably have more shallower sleep, and also you have much less slow wave sleep. So there's a couple of things that are happening as you get older. One is that you have more waking, and it's usually you have to go to the bathroom more, and then your slow wave sleep decreases, so you don't have as deep sleep. And those are usually the major things. You actually sleep. And the other aspect of it is that when you're young, you have these really strong circadian drives that tell you when to go to sleep and when to wake up. And as you get older, those signals for when you should be going to sleep and waking up are less strong. And so you could pretty much fall asleep at a variety more times in the day and the night. And you just have there's a whole range of studies on older adults and sleep and how it changes, and it's a pretty new field, but it's quite interesting. Thank you very much.